We have, years ago, we tried a college age class. Yeah, good luck with that. Ask Robert. She's trying to get me to stand still for the camera. We tried a college class a few years ago. It's a challenge, and we've had a quarter. I think we've done quarters at a time for young adults, young marrieds, whatever. I have, as a lot of you know, I came here in 2006 to work with small groups and outreach. About 2007 or 8, all of a sudden I was kind of the de facto youth minister. And no one knows how that happened. It just happened. And I spent a long time, up until about a year ago, working pretty consistently with our youth, which I was fine with. I mean, my kids were in the youth group for that period, so Karen and I kind of figured we're going to be involved anyway, so let's do it. But about 2 years ago, I told the elder, I said, when Caitlin graduates from high school, I want to graduate from high school. I mean, I want to graduate from youth stuff. And I told him a couple of different things I'd like to work with, and this was one of them. And which is kind of weird because several of you were part of the youth group that I was beginning with, and now you're here. But this is something I'm excited about. But I looked at the demographics of our congregation about a year ago, and this age group makes up about a third of our congregation, which is really weird. I mean, that's not. I'm just trying to be personal. That's unusual for a congregation our size. Let me ask you this: how many of you have become active, have moved here, or whatever, in the last 7 years? James, you're that group, kind of. So, and if we had more people here, there'd be a higher number of that. But our elders saw that we need this, that we need to be working with, and like I said, it's kind of odd for the way we're doing it, is we're going from right out of high school up to people with kids in elementary school. So it's a broad age range. But the thing that I told the elders, and some of you guys, I've preached this sermon at you 100 times, but I told our elders that for those right out of high school, that when they think about becoming adults, like just to pick on my own son, pick on Blake, when he looks at becoming an adult, what's it gonna be like when I'm a full-fledged adult? He doesn't want to look at me. I mean, he doesn't want to go, how do I get from 22 to 50? I mean, that's not what he wants to do. So he needs you guys. You guys older than that age group, you need to be around each other because you're all kind of in the same situation. Freshly married, some of you, maybe not so much freshly married, but you got kids all about the same age, and you all are more of a peer group than I think we usually think. And I told the elders, if I'm in an adult class and I'm sitting in there with somebody in their 70s, nobody cares. It's just normal. It's somebody 20 years older than me. So that's kind of why we have, and the other thing is part of it is facilities. We don't have another class. We can't split this into 2 classes. But so what we're going to do with this quarter, and like I said, this is not going to be a 1 quarter deal. This is something that our elders have committed to. This is your classroom now. So we get to figure out how to work the monitor thing at some point. But and we'll continue this for the foreseeable future. This quarter, we're going to talk about creating Christian character. We're going to talk about several different topics. Next quarter, Butch Amix is going to teach a Christian finances, Christian financial planning or something like that. That, again, is going to be in here. That may bring in some other age groups too, but that's fine. Then the end of the year, I'm going to teach again. We're going to go through the Gospel of Mark, and I'm going to ask some of you guys to each teach a week, so we can kind of share the teaching in that quarter. But what we're going to talk about today to start is commitment, which I think is kind of a fitting topic when we're talking about starting a new thing. And really the key to this whole not just this class, but the key to this ministry idea is you all getting to know each other. You all getting to where you have a connection with each other. And what we're going to do, I think I've shared this with several of you too, but we're going to use this class as kind of a hub for everything else that we can do, where we can do outreach. You all have connections at work or wherever that people you want to reach, that it might not be easy to get them to come here, but maybe if we got where we had 2 or 3 groups having dinner once a month, you can invite somebody to that. Some different ideas that we'll throw out over the next couple of weeks. But we'll talk about some service projects that we can do, that we can do for our congregation, or we can do for the community, or whatever. But the plan is for this class to be kind of the center of where all that stuff goes. And any ideas that you have for service, outreach, fellowship, I'm working with Kevin and Yolanda Barnes, who have already started the young adult deal. And Kevin's been doing that about 2 years or whatever. And Kevin has a list of fellowship, social type activities already. The summer is, I think there's something once a month. But any ideas that you have about what can we do to reach out? What can we do to build cohesion among ourselves even? And then use that cohesion, use that connectivity to then reach out to the people around us. Any ideas you have, just throw them out, tell me, whatever. Let's use this as a time to share. Okay, so first thing we're going to talk about is commitment. When you think of the idea of someone who exemplifies commitment outside of the Bible, don't go to the Bible yet. Think of somebody who you think, that guy was committed, that woman was committed to what they did. Think about that. Well, think about that, and we're going to say a prayer. Stop thinking about it while we say the prayer. Blake, would you lead us in a prayer? Amen. Okay, so commitment. Outside the Bible, who do you think of? Who comes to mind? Kobe Bryant. Played after he popped his Achilles. Grosses me out.
Edison.
Who?
Edison.
Thomas Edison. Who else? See, I thought like Abe Lincoln. If you know any Abe Lincoln's history, he was a series of failures and then became president. You know. MLK stuck with it. Walt Disney. Yeah, absolutely. A man of many failures. Our elders. I guess that's outside the Bible. But yeah, our elders, guys who have stuck with it, dealing with. Elders, really good elders anywhere. That's a good point. I think of Harry Truman. I read Harry Truman's biography a few months ago. That dude had a rough stretch. His own party didn't like him, but he again ends up being president. Okay, so what do those people have in common? Why do we say those people are committed? They're not like in a crazy house or anything, but
They're not immediately successful, so they have to keep on trying.
They keep on trying. It's a stick-to-itiveness. Okay, how about Bible examples? Who do you think of? Who? Paul. Paul, you're going to go to jail. All right, well, I'll stay in jail for a while, then I'll keep doing exactly what got me thrown in jail.
I'd say Moses was really committed.
Moses was committed. How Moses didn't just run off and leave those people, no one knows. Yeah. You know what? That whole idea of kill them all, let's do that. Who else?
Do we consider Samson being committed?
Yeah. Yeah, eventually. Yeah, he got there, I would say. Yeah. Daniel, yeah, absolutely. Well, that's what I want us to do this morning is kind of define this idea of commitment from a biblical perspective, and then look at the why. I think it's Simon Sinek has written a book called "It Starts with Why." It's a kind of a popular book right now, and it's all about when you find your why, when you find the point of what you're doing, then the how is easier. Some philosopher, I think it was Nietzsche, said, when a man finds his why, the hows will fall into place, or something like that. But so we're going to look at the why. Why should we be committed? Look at our commitment, and then we'll look at some examples. This will probably be this week and next week, but we'll get there. Now, when we think about commitment, have y'all heard the illustration about the pig and the chicken? Pig and the chicken are walking down the street together, and they pass this cafe, and it says, ham and eggs breakfast, ham and eggs and a biscuit for $2.99. And the chicken looks at the pig and goes, that's so great. That's my contribution to a great breakfast. The pig goes, that was your contribution. That's a commitment from me. Because the pig's got to die for that to happen. The chicken lays an egg. So there's a difference between commitment and a contribution. There's a difference between a commitment and interest. When it was before I was a deacon in Broken Arrow. We had a ministry fair thing one night, and our involvement minister got up and said that one of the things that they were looking at starting is small groups. And we were a congregation at that time of about 800, so small groups was a good idea. We needed them. And he had a good presentation about what the idea was. So I went up to him afterward and said, Wayne, I'd like to be involved with that. And he just handed me the manila folder. And he goes, here, it's yours. And I was like, it's not exactly what I meant, but... So, and then I had this big sign-up sheet. Who wants to be involved? Who's interested in doing this? And had a bunch of people on the list. Had this dinner Sunday night after services to kind of talk about how it's going to work, who all is going to be in what groups and everything. Had 280-something people signed up on this list. Ended up with like 40 people there. And I was so bummed. I went and talked to our preacher. I said, Bill, I was like, all these people signed up, but hardly anybody showed up. And he goes, now, what did it say? I was like, would you like to be involved? Are you interested in being involved? And he goes, there's a huge difference between being interested and being committed. And I'll never forget that, because that is so true. I mean, that's a reality that we have to live with. You think about just things in the news today even. We live in a culture, and I say this, not that it's our culture exclusive, and we'll talk about that too, but we live in a culture where we want to get to a certain point the easiest way possible. We want the best thing that we can get the easiest way we can possibly get it. You think of current news. I want my kid in USC no matter what. And I'm going to lie, cheat, and steal, do whatever I have to do to get my kid in there. But, and this is like yesterday. I mean, this is today's news. Lance Armstrong, I don't know if Lance Armstrong's ordeal happened about 2005 to 2007. The cycling king of the world, and blatant cheater. In a sport that is full of blatant cheaters, apparently, but he got caught. Enron, 2001, I believe. All kinds of financial scheming that lost a bunch of people's money in the largest bankruptcy. It was the largest bankruptcy in the history of the United States until the next year, when WorldCom went bankrupt too. But the point is that we think about our culture today as this get stuff easily. Well, it's been going on for years. But I mean, because that's kind of human nature. We want to get the best we can the easiest way possible. Now, what do we know? I mean, we talk about all those people who are committed. You said Kobe. Think of Kobe Bryant, a guy who played for several years, played until he was what? Mid-30s, something like that. Played with the same team the whole time, was totally committed to that team, was apparently a pain in the neck to have to work with, but he got everything he attained through hard work. We know good businesses. You talk about Walt Disney. All these people we name. All these people could have quit when it really got hard, could have went, this isn't for me. But kept going, kept building on what it was that they knew, what it was that they had to work with. Spiritually, we have to think the same way, right? We have to start where we are spiritually and build and just not quit. That's really the idea of commitment. G.K. Chesterton, religious writer years ago, a great quote. He says, "The Christian ideal has not been tried and found wanting. it has been found difficult and left untried. See, that's the antithesis of commitment. When we look at what it means to be a Christian and go, to really commit, I just don't know if I can do that because it's hard, because it's going to be time consuming. Teddy Roosevelt, one of my favorite guys to read about, is a guy full of quotes. How many of you have ever heard "It's not the critic who counts" quote? It's not the critic who counts, it's not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. It's a great quote. But this is another quote. This is from the Hamilton Club in Chicago in 1899. For some reason, that just is fascinating to me. But he says, "Far better is it to dare mighty things, to win glorious triumphs, even though checkered by failure, than to rank with those poor spirits who neither enjoy nor suffer much because they live in a gray twilight that knows not victory nor defeat." I mean, that's just a great thing. And this is a guy, I don't know if you know much about Roosevelt's history. He was a scrawny, sickly kid that decided, I'm not going to be a scrawny, sickly kid anymore. And he made himself, he is like the epitome of the self-made man. But he has all kinds of quotes about this idea of how do we persevere? How do we continue with who we're supposed to be? When we don't fully commit, and let's talk about our Christian lives now. When we try and do something kind of good, we try and be a good Christian, we kind of try and do, but we're just kind of not doing it completely. What do? Do you do it well? No, you can't kind of be a Christian. It's like kind of being a male. Well, that's maybe not the best analogy in our culture today. But you can't kind of be a Christian. You can't just decide I'm going to be a Christian on Sundays. I'm going to be a Christian when I come to church. It's got to be a full life thing. Because the idea of trying to do it without commitment is that gray twilight, where we're just kind of half in, half out. Turn over to Romans chapter 12. What we're going to do, this is a familiar passage. You all know this. We're going to look at this verse. We're going to talk about this. And then I'm going to split you in quarters here, quadrants. And those discussion questions, we'll talk about that when we get here. You're not going to be stuck in a weird situation, but you'll be fine. Romans 12, 1 and 2. Somebody read that for me, please. Oh, challenge.
I urge you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies a living and holy sacrifice, acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service and worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what the will of God is, that which is good and acceptable and perfect.
Okay, probably pretty familiar passage. But these verses, to me, are just the summation of what it means to commit. Present your bodies a living sacrifice. When we think about really being taken in by God, really being all in for God, then we'll be all over that idea of being a living sacrifice. The idea of offer, really, and I don't know, you probably heard this. How many of you heard, preachers, I probably said it, stand up and talk, this present yourself a living sacrifice. How often does that happen? It's got to be a daily thing. Well, really, technically, the word offer is a one-time thing. It's you make a commitment and say, this is what I'm doing. Now, can you renew your marriage vows? Sure. So the idea of that offering yourself as a living sacrifice certainly can be renewed, and sometimes, of course, it may have to be renewed. It may need to be renewed daily. But what this means or let me just ask you, what does it mean? This whole idea of offer yourself as a living sacrifice. What does that mean? Offer your bodies in particular. Present yourself as God would want you to. What else? If you're a sacrifice, okay, you're going to the place, you're the sacrifice. A few minutes later, what are you? Dead. You have given yourself to whatever you're sacrificing yourself to. That's this idea, is that to be really committed I mean, and it's such a Bible-y phrase. It's such a Bible term. We have to die to ourselves. But I mean, but that's what it is. It's and that's what this verse talks about, is that whole idea of dying to ourselves. Now, so what about the next verse, the verse 2, the whole transformation thing, the idea of don't conform but be transformed. We expect people, and I think I think it's just people expect people to conform to their surroundings. There's a idiom that says that. What's the phrase that you conform to your surroundings? When in Rome, do as the Romans do. When in Vegas, do as the people in Vegas do. You know, when and wherever, do what just conform. But that's not, that is so opposite of what this verse is talking about and what it means for us as Christians. That we need to be cognizant of the fact that because of God's gift to us, and we'll talk about that more in a minute, because of God's grace, we've been taken out of that be just like everybody else world. And we've been put in a new situation. And then that expression, Brad, read the last part of verse 1, which is your what? Spiritual?
Living a life of sacrifice acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service of worship.
Spiritual service of worship. That's New American Standard? What does New King James say? Which is your reasonable service. Now, and we were just having the New King James discussion a while ago. The words there, the word for service and worship is the word latreo. It's the actual Greek word that means the service that takes place during worship that the priests would do. The word reasonable or spiritual is the word we get logic from. It's logikos. So it's really saying, reasonable service, reasonable spiritual service would actually be the best translation. Why is it reasonable? He's saying present your bodies, which means everything you are, as a living sacrifice, which to us is crazy sounding. And then he says, well, that's just reasonable. Why is that reasonable? How is that reasonable? What's that? It's all owed to God anyway, right? And that's what, yeah. It makes the most sense when you, yeah, exactly. It's all owed to God, and you put it in. But those are the right answers. But isn't that hard? I mean, the right answer to say in here is because we all owe it to God anyway, and it's reasonable when you think about what God has done for us. So what about every day of my life? Shoot your answer down, I'm just saying. Those are the right answers. And we all know that intellectually, but it's the day in, day out. How do I commit to that? How do I present my body as that living sacrifice? Okay, so yes, sir.
Just real quick on that. I think those are good, like those transitions. But the ESV just says this is your spiritual worship.
Yeah.
And to me, like, it really kind of applies because I think the NIV says like your spiritual act of worship.
Mm-hmm.
True and proper worship.
Yeah.
Something used to say spiritual act of worship, but for some reason that's memorized. But I feel like we kind of do that. Like, we get so used to like come to church and like, oh hey, I'm on the Lord's table today, or oh hey, I'm leading singing, or I have a prayer, and like we kind of put those as our spiritual acts of worship. And so when we hear it that way, it's easy to kind of apply this just to like Sunday or just to Wednesday, or hey, I might be helping with LTC or something.
Yeah.
It's not really like when I'm at work.
And that's exactly why, in just my opinion, it's frustrating that some of the different translations of that verse, because like I said, my barely educated opinion is the best way to translate that based on those words is reasonable spiritual service. And when we use that idea of service of worship, we get the 21st century mindset of, well, worship is in there. So it's the things we do at church. Brock.
I was listening to sports talk earlier this week. Davison had a quote, and it kind of goes along with this idea of, he said, let the light that shines within you shine brighter than the light that shines on you.
Oh, yeah, very good. Dabo Sweeney's Clemson football coach. Let the light that shines in you shine brighter than the light that shines on you. And That's how we live in front of people around us. When people are looking at what they should see is who we are inside. And that's kind of where we're actually going to end up a little bit here. But what we're going to do now, what I want you to do is split yourselves right here, Brad, and split in half. Brad, and your row, you're the middle. That quadrant, this quadrant, and this quadrant. I want you to just maybe turn around, just kind of look at each other, and I want you to talk about a couple of those, one or two of those questions in that first section. Zach, would you want to go back there with them? Yeah. And let's go with them. Go that way. Yeah, right back there. There. Back square, this square, this square, this square. And when you're done, we're going to talk about Joshua 24. Joshua 24 is when Joshua takes over leading the nation of Israel, and he says that great statement to him. He says, pick who you're going to serve, whether God's over there or serve God, but pick one. So what I want you to do is, of those first two sets of discussion questions, take one or two of them and just throw it out there and just kind of share amongst yourselves. And just take like a couple of minutes a question, give it about 5 minutes, and we'll be done. This was actually just a ruse so I could get coffee. Okay, if you're still on Romans, scoot down to the Joshua one and throw one of those out. Yeah, the Joshua 24, there's that whole section where he ends up with, choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And he says, pick these false gods or pick God, but pick something. I just heard Zach say this is the verse that's in everyone's home. If it's not in yours, it's in your grandparents' house. You just have to, it's on a little plaque or something. It's like a farm or whatever. Okay, I'm going to stop you now. Have you got about 43 seconds for each thing? But let me ask you, did anybody, I don't know which question you picked, for the Romans 12, this idea of transforming our mind, what resources, anybody talk about the resources? What resources do we have for transforming our minds? Anybody discuss that? Well, you're supposed to just pick one, not all of them. Okay, well, let me just ask you then. When we talk about this idea that we're called to do this, we're called by God to not conform to be just like everybody else. But the verse says He's going to transform our minds. How does that happen? What resources do we have available? The Bible. I mean, that, again, right? Oh, so I almost made that sound. That's the right answer. I was like, wow, how did I do that? But yes, the Bible obviously is the right answer. What else? Each other. Each other. And that, again, that is ideally what I want this to be about, is we use each other to do this transformation, to do this non-conforming. Is that the right way to say it? What else do you discover? What else do you talk about in Romans? Anything that jumped out of your discussions?
There's an interesting idea in our group that maybe when he says present your bodies, there's some immediate context that then talks about the church as a body. So I'm wondering if there's a corporate connotation to the verse too.
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, I had in my notes more about the idea of presenting your body. That tells us that really doing this, the way Paul talks, it isn't just a think thing. I think spiritual thoughts. I know a lot about the Bible. What does your body do? Do you do anything? Do you function as a spiritual person? Anything else?
We talked about it too, that if God calls us to present our spirits or our souls as living sacrifices, it's not going to be visible to people around us.
Yeah.
He's asking us to live out in some way that's visible to our peers.
Yeah, and like I said, I think that's why the word bodies is in there. And when I quote it, I sometimes say, present yourself a living sacrifice. But it's bodies.
I think John was saying there was an idea of like it meant the church body
Mm-hmm.
as the individual. So it's more of like present
Us.
parts.
Yeah.
Us.
That we corporately even are the living sacrifice. And that's there, that connotation, I guess, could be there because, the body is us. The body is me, the body is you, so we all should be presenting ourselves this way. How about the Joshua thoughts? One of the things that always stands out to me is we as people, we're going to serve something. We just are. Even if you do nothing, you sit at home on your couch all day long, you're serving yourself. You're still serving something. So that's what Joshua says. Pick something. Any thoughts come out of the Joshua questions? You had 19 seconds too.
On the second question, why do you think he only gives them two choices?
Yeah.
Kind of brought up like the idea of like, with kids, if you give them like more than one option, sometimes, or if you give them like 3 or 5 options, like it's just going to be a disaster.
Yeah.
So like God kind of keeping it simple. And then we also kind of related it to the idea of like being lukewarm. Like God doesn't want us to be lukewarm. Either be hot or be cold.
Yeah. Be in or be out.
All in or all out.
Yeah. Yeah, and really, that's the essence of what Paul's saying in Romans 12. When we think about the why for our commitment, one of the ones I was going to put on that discussions was Jeremiah 31 through 34. That's quoted again in Hebrews chapter 8, where God says, "Behold, the days are coming, says the Lord, where I'll make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. Not like the covenant I made with our fathers who went before them, who did terrible things, I was a husband to them." But he's basically saying, there's going to be this new covenant, and I'm going to write it on your hearts and write it on your minds, and I won't remember your sins, and I'll be your God, and you'll be my people. When we think about the why of, and we'll talk more about it next week, the demands, and we have to be real, we have to be honest. There are demands to be a Christian. It's not a piece of cake. It's not super easy. And we have to be real with that. But when we think of the why for us, you think of what God said to Jeremiah. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make this new thing. And in that new thing, I'm not going to remember your sins if we have a relationship. And I'll be your God and you'll be my people. And then, like I said, it's repeated in Hebrews chapter 8. But then you think of a New Testament equivalent. 1 John chapter 4. 1 John chapter 4 verses 9 and 10 says, God's love was revealed among us in this way. God sent his one and only Son into the world so that we might live through him. Love consists in this. Not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son to be the atoning sacrifice for our sins. So when we think about our commitment to God, and this is where we'll continue with this thought next week, that we can't look at God and go, well, yeah, you're asking me to give everything. I mean, we look at what God did for us, and that God has had this plan for his people, whether it's the nation of Israel or his New Testament people, New Covenant people. And God says, I'm always going to be there for you, and I've proved it over and over and over and over again. So that's why I think that Romans 12:1, it's a reasonable spiritual service for us to say, all right, God, I'll give it everything. Because look at what he did for us. Okay, so keep those, or if you can, keep those discussion questions. We'll do the second half of them next week, and we'll have more time for that next week. I won't have to do the whole introductory spiel again. But here's another thing. If you can think of somebody who should be in this class today that isn't, send them a text or call them or whatever, and see if we can get them here next week, okay? And any ideas for anything, let me know. We'll go from there. And come eat like